Hello and welcome back to Sweet Yellow House. It's time for our Friday craft again, but before we get started, I just wanted to remind you that we do have a Patreon account if you would consider joining that and helping us out. So let's get started. We're going to start out with these Bailey's Irish cream bottles, and I have several of these, and I'm sure that's telling on myself, but I'm going to remove all the labels and tags and everything and make sure that they are clean. I'm going to start off with the chiffon cream and the baking soda, and I'm going to mix those together, and I'm going to mix quite a bit of the baking soda in there because I want a lot of texture. So I wouldn't say half and half, but I did put quite a bit in there. So I started painting those, and I also did the neck of the bottle and inside the top just so that it looked finished. So by the time it was all said and done, I painted 3 coats and just so that I would get a lot of texture there and it would be full coverage and none of that black would be showing through. So then I grabbed my molds, and I'm using this grapes IOD mold, and I grabbed my paper clay and I'm using that. And the way that I work with this stuff is that I put it in there piece by piece. So first of all, I'm going to dust the mold with some cornstarch. That way when I'm trying to get it out, it won't stick as much, and it also helps just, you know, release it all the way around, so, and to kind of maneuver that in there without it sticking. So I just kind of tear off little bits and pieces and I put it in there and kind of work it with my finger. I don't really like to use one big hunk of clay and put it in there. I just seems like I get overwhelmed, and it just seems harder for me to kind of get into all the little grooves and stuff. So I'm gonna take my little plastic scraper here, and this is a tool that you get in your IOD transfer. So this actually works really well, and what I do is I put that in the center halfway through and I pull it out towards that micro edge, and that helps to kind of make that edge really sharp. So the reason why I like using the little stick is because it's light enough and it has a, you know, that right angle edge, and so you can kind of get in between there and it just works out really well. So I'm just working this through, and when most of the time I will make extra molds, and just because I'm not really always sure what I'm going to be using, and I want to have options and not have to go back through there. So I feel what I think I'm going to need, and when I'm satisfied, and then I pop that into the freezer for 20 minutes. And while that's in the freezer, I grab my Olive Orchard mold, I believe this is, and that's also an IOD mold, the same paper clay. And again, I'm gonna dust my mold with some cornstarch, and I'm gonna begin filling this mold in the exact same way. So with this one too, I just make extra because I can always use, the extra pieces. And so I never am afraid that I'm overdoing it. So when I get done with that, I pop that into the freezer and I let that go. So here 20 minutes has passed, and I pull out the grapes mold, and I'm just pulling that out and kind of trying to figure out how I want that. And once I get a design where I want it, I'm going to get my Type Bond glue, and I'm going to put that pretty hefty amount on the back and just take it all the way to the edges and glue that down. You don't really want to press too hard, even though it's a little bit softer and stuff, because you don't want to smush the detail out of there. So I'm just kind of arranging that where I want. And a lot of times too, I'll stack these molds on top of each other just so that it'll give it more depth, more character, and it won't, I don't know, to me it just looks more, I I don't know what the word is, but it looks more expensive and has more character. So I went back and got the olive orchard mold out of the freezer, and I began to pop that out. With this particular mold, I will say you would probably do better to put it in the freezer. It's a fantastic mold, but it has a lot of fine detail, which is a great thing. But if your if your clay is soft, you're gonna distort that trying to get it out. It's just a lot easier. So once I get a design where I want it, then I begin to glue those pieces down onto my bottle. And here's a technique that I use. I actually grab a flathead utensil of some sort, and I pull those edges down and smush them kind of out over the surface, and it kind of bonds those or binds them together, and it makes that it makes those gaps kind of fill in and go away. So another technique that I actually used here, you'll see I actually glued the mold on before I ever painted the bottles, and I filled the gaps in with hot glue. So, and that worked as well. So I'm gonna grab the paint back that I mixed up earlier to paint the bottles with, and I'm actually gonna go over these molds once they're dry and they're not soft anymore, just because it makes it easier to paint. I know a lot of people will paint over them when they're not completely dry yet. So I grabbed some of my antiquing wax, I mixed that with some water till I was happy, and I wet a paper towel just so that it was easier to kind of manipulate that over the mold once I start kind of wiping that back. So the technique I used for this is I put it on and wiped it back. I put it on and I wiped it back, and you've seen me do this several times. So I just made it darker in the areas that I felt like, you know, over the years that maybe dust would settle into those nooks and crannies, and that was the technique I used for that. To try to hurry the drying process along, I did use my heat gun, which I didn't show here, but that way I could keep layering that wax on and get it as dark as where I wanted to get it. So the darkest parts I made were around the neck of the bottle and around the bottom of the bottle, and also around the mold area, and then just around the other parts of the bottle I just did kind of a light coloring on those, because I didn't want the whole thing, and I really wanted the texture to kind of show through there, so, and have some different color variations and stuff, because I just felt like it would make the bottle look more authentic. So, and of course it wouldn't be a project unless I had my gilding wax. So I grabbed that out, and just using my finger I started to go over the mold. I didn't go over any other part of the bottle. I only used this in the mold area, and I was a little heavier handed with that just because I wanted the details on those molds to pop and really show up. So I just used my finger and went over, and I don't think I showed it here, but I think I did get a small brush and kind of go in the nooks and crannies where I felt like it needed a little more. So I hope you like these and the way they turned out, and thank you for watching. I appreciate you spending your time with me. And these pictures are so great. The flowers here are from my garden. They're the dahlias, and the little tomatoes are from my garden as well. So enjoy, and we will see you next Friday.